welcome. We're delighted to have you all here for what I think is going to be a very fun evening. If they were still in office, of course, it would be tense. But they're out there.
We would have just won and been relaxed. And
6 years goes like this. But we're going to have some fun. Of course, Senator McCaskill is not yet here. I was just saying to them, you know, she's out of office and now she can fly her plane wherever she wants. And so she's flown out and didn't even offer them a ride. They were all coming from Washington. That's not collegiality. So we're looking forward to your reaction to that. Is everybody turned on?
I'm on.
Okay, good.
so we need you to help us too. When Claire gets here, Heidi and I are going to look very seriously and go, you know, we've had to carry her water for years. And then you all applaud and say, yes, that's exactly right. Then she'd be in a really bad mood the whole night.
The one thing you need to know about Claire is she knows a setup when she sees it.
So this is like Colbert, isn't it? I mean, maybe we can get back to the questions. Look, there is good news. The students here, they're very well mannered at the University of Virginia, and they have all agreed, because we're all baby boomers, not to use the phrase "okay, boomer." Okay. They're not doing that. That's the new insult for those of you you probably haven't heard it yet.
You know what? That would be the nicest thing said to me in the last 2 years. It really would.
Well,
It usually started off with, hey, and then it was LE was the last two letters of the second word. So.
Yeah, well, I get it. Believe me. We're gonna talk about a lot of subjects, and I want you all to participate a lot and to have a lot of questions. I'm going to ask a few opening questions to, break the ice. I think it's broken actually, but we're going to cover a few subjects, and I've got to start out with the hottest news, which I bet a lot of you haven't heard, but it's actually true. Michael Bloomberg has just jumped into the Democratic Party race for president. And really, that's what we needed, because we only have 25 candidates. So this is very useful. And Eric Holder, not to be outdone, called a favorite columnist of his to say, don't let Bloomberg take all the publicity. I'm going to be running too. So I guess there's two more candidates. And I'm putting you right on the spot. First of all, who are you for? And it doesn't have to be just Bloomberg and Eric Holder. You can pick among other people's. But second, and a serious question, why are they jumping in? What is the point of all this?
Well, I mean...
wait, I haven't introduced you.
Yeah, no, well, that's okay. Why take up that time, right?
She's Heidi.
Yeah,
I'm
Heidi.
Joe.
He's Joe. But what I would tell you is that I am for a bumper sticker that I saw in a car today on campus that said, "The Democrat 2020." That's who I'm for, the Democrat 2020.
The favorite one around here is on a lot of bumpers is any functioning adult in 2020. So that means a change in the Oval Office.
Why is Bloomberg getting in? I know some people who know Bloomberg pretty well, and who he consulted with as he was trying to decide whether he would get in earlier. And the sense was, as long as Joe Biden was in, there wouldn't be a path forward for him to be successful, and he didn't have anything else to add. And I think that what he sees, and what a lot of people honestly on the moderate side of the Democratic Party see, is this swing to the left where the discussion is about Medicare for all. It's about, who can have a higher level of wealth tax? What are we going to do to shut down fracking? What are we going to do all of these things? And I think people like Bloomberg probably would stay out of it, except he doesn't like Donald Trump very much. And I think there's a lot of people who are looking at this field and analyzing, can any of these people beat Donald Trump? And I think the concern for whether a Democrat that is currently running can be successful in the 2020 election is what's driving new entrants into the race.
Joe?
Who I am for is, again,
The Democrat.
we'll support the Democrat candidate. I have a great affection for Joe Biden, who has come in to help me out in campaigns time after time after time. People like Amy Klobuchar, who's extraordinary as well. And, I'm from South Bend, Indiana. And so Pete Buttigieg who is somebody that my family grew up with. At his announcement, I sat next to his mom, and she said, "That's my boy." I said, "I'm aware of that." And he's working extraordinarily hard too. What's so interesting about this is, I grew up as the fifth of five. And what I mean by that is you work hard and you work hard and you work hard and you do the best you can and you hope to get a fair shot. And it's like, you're coming in the race now after everybody's worked for a year, after we've knocked on doors, after we've made phone calls, after we've done this. And I have $1 billion in my pocket because $1 billion will cover all the hard work of all the human beings who are out there. I just don't think that that's going to do the trick, because I think folks have already started to get the measure of the different candidates, seen who they are, and Americans reward hard work in most cases. And to sit there after working a year and a half and see somebody, it's like cutting in line at the Motor Vehicle Bureau. You are never the most popular person when you cut in line at the BMV. We've been at customs coming back from overseas trips to see our troops, and you're at the customs line, and the line is forever, and they go, "You can move right in front," and I'm like, there's not a chance on earth that I would ever move in front of all of these voters from Indiana who will hate me forever. That is not happening.
I want to make a point about Bloomberg, though, and I think it gets forgotten. And maybe if you live in a place like North Dakota, you hear it over and over again. You ask people why they tolerate such miserable human behavior in a president and still will support him. And they'll say he's a businessman, he knows what he's doing, the economy's good, and so we will plug our nose. He's against unnecessary regulation. We will plug our nose and vote for him. There's going to be no one better positioned to make an economic argument, that he won't be measured against Trump. Trust me, Trump is chump change compared to Bloomberg. He actually kind of did it on his own. Bloomberg has run a big city. He has had to compromise certain kind of conservative principles he's had. And he's great on climate. He has been a leader on guns. I mean, trust me, I know this personally, since he ran campaign ads against me. He's very much into public health. He's one of the top funders of the World Health Organization anti-tobacco program. In fact, there wouldn't be a global anti-tobacco program without Bloomberg. So there's a lot about Bloomberg that you probably don't know unless you've been, kind of working in these various fields. And so I think that Bloomberg adds an additional dimension that Steyer would never bring. And that is the kind of, I'm my own self-made man. I'm not going to take somebody else's campaign contributions, i.e., what is the president who promised 4 years ago that he was going to fund himself and not be bought and sold? Now he's out, buying and selling, children's T-shirts, right? And so I think I wouldn't discredit Bloomberg right out of the box. I think Bloomberg's going to be very attractive if he gets into moderates who are looking for a candidate who didn't see Amy emerging with a lot of strength and didn't see Michael Bennet. I think Michael Bennet and Biden were the three that most moderates were looking at, and the other ones were never going to do very well. People like Tim Ryan. We can name a few on the moderate side. The Governor Bullock hasn't emerged. So there really is a sense that there is not a viable moderate candidate. And so I'm with you, Larry, that this says more about what moderates and what people are saying about Joe Biden than it does about the rest of the race.
Bloomberg is very talented, extraordinary business person, and a good person. I think it's, he might be smelling weakness with Biden. And so Joe has to hold it. If Joe holds it together, it may moot this.
Yeah.
Or the vice president, I should say, yeah.
But right now, I would say Joe Biden would be very unhappy, right?
He's not in a good mood tonight.
He's not in a good mood tonight, exactly. So stay away from him. If you're planning on having dinner later with him, postpone it to a future time. Now look, what I'm going to do, if I can't, our norm here, by the way, is to ask a tough question and then introduce our speakers. It's a tradition I just started.
We never followed the rules anyhow.
And not me and Joe.
I'm so discombobulated because of Claire McCaskill. We're
sure,
really
it's all
going to
her
give it to
fault.
her. I can't wait till she gets here. Can I go ahead and introduce you two? And then I may or may not even bother to introduce Claire McCaskill.
We're
She's
good with
late.
that.
I'll tell her we're trying to save time. Senator Heidi Heitkamp was born in Breckenridge, Minnesota. And
It's where the hospital was. It's across the river. Honestly, I hate it when people say I was born in Minnesota.
well, I mean, it's not that far
I know,
away
I know,
from North
but it makes
Dakota.
it sound
so-
like I was born in Minnesota.
That territory all looks alike anyway. I mean, that's my feeling of flying over it.
Boy, it's so good to be here with a moderator who understands America.
Flyover country, that's one of that relates to our topic. It's one of the reasons why Democrats aren't doing as well as they can. They're not connecting with flyover country. Now, you've interrupted Senator Heitkamp's introduction. After graduating from the University of North Dakota, she earned a law degree from Lewis and Clark College. You left North Dakota again.
Yeah.
Okay. She represented North Dakota in the U.S. Senate from 2013 to 2019. And let's be honest, in these days and times, it's amazing that you were elected. And be honest, you weren't expected to. The Republican
I kinda
was way
thought I
ahead in
could.
the polls, and
Yeah.
we just assume Republicans will win North Dakota. So that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself. After law school, she worked at the Environmental Protection Agency and was later elected state attorney general in North Dakota. In 2011, she entered the U.S. Senate race and defeated the Republican candidate to become the first woman elected from the state of North Dakota. Now, you did seek a second term in 2018. Was a Democratic year in some places and not in others, and I think not in others included North Dakota. So that's part of the discussion today, why red states can't even come along in a wave. So give an ovation to Senator Heitkamp. That's to make up for all the mistakes that I made. Okay. Now, let me introduce Senator Joe Donnelly. I like the way you put it in your resume. He's a former United States Senator from Indiana. And you're in Virginia. Former is a lot better than being current. That's just the way we are. We like old things. He was born in Queens. Isn't that incredible?
Again, the hospital was in Queens. But I can't say I drove from South Bend to be born there. But
Well, I hope you weren't driving at that age. He received his bachelor's degree in government and a law degree from the University of Notre Dame. It's fantastic. He was twice reelected to the House of Representatives from a district in Indiana before running for the U.S. Senate in 2012. And he also served until a Republican really surprised him, and we're going to talk about why. You were well ahead for much of the campaign, but again, it's Indiana. Have you noticed a little change in Indiana? Isn't that Mike Pence's state? I think he comes from there, something like that.
I could tell Mike Pence stories for about 2 hours.
Well, go ahead. We'd like to hear them because he's probably going to be out there campaigning again next year.
He might be president.
Well, oh, please. I don't know if Mother would approve or not, but we'll see.
Have to bring her along.
Have to bring her along. You are now at Aiken Gump in D.C., and you're a resident fellow at David Axelrod's Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, which was rated the second best center for politics in the country.
And I'm also teaching at Notre Dame.
Oh, you're teaching at Notre Dame. All right, terrific. And now...
And we played Virginia in football this year, by the way.
Well, we're aware of that. I wasn't going to bring it up.
I was surely going to bring it up.
And now, having just turned the page, let me finish introducing Senator Heidi Heitkamp. This is really
It's all good. You don't have
the
to
end
do
of it.
this.
No, I want to because this is very interesting to me. This past spring, you became a CNBC contributor and a visiting fellow at the Institute of Politics at the Harvard Kennedy School. That's the number 3 institute for politics in the country.
If only I'd known.
And well, we can still arrange something here. They love the lawn. They saw the lawn today. They fell in love with it, and you know what that means. She also launched, just to finish this up, she also launched One Country Project, an organization aimed at helping Democrats reconnect with rural voters. And I'm going to ask you about that in just a second after we give an ovation to Senator Donnelly, which you forgot to do. Thank you. So the last time I'm drinking at dinner before coming to a panel, I can tell you that much. Tell us about the One Country Project.
Well, one of the things that you would see over a period of time, and I know I don't look as old as Joe Donnelly, but we're about the same age. He's just a month older than I am. But I've been in this business a long time. I ran my first statewide race when I was 28 years old. And didn't know much, but I thought it was important for young people to get involved and for women to get involved, and so I got convinced to run for state auditor. And so I learned a lot. Probably the most I ever learned in politics, I learned during that race. But I learned one thing that I never thought would change, that my base was working class people and seniors as a Democrat. That those are the people who were always going to support Democrats. Those are the people that we really worked with and thought about, and small farmers. Fast forward to 2018, this thing has been completely flipped. And so you wonder, how is it, if you think about the center of the country, and you start out with North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. I want you to think about that. Over the last 20 years, or 40 years, it'd be about 60-40 representation. About 40% of the senators would have been Democrats and about 60 Republicans. Do you know how many Democratic senators are in that corridor today?
None.
Not one. And it is because we have lost the ability, I think, to speak to rural voters and to talk and to connect with them in a way that reflects their values and that they know you're going to carry those values to whatever job that you go. And so along with Joe Donnelly, we started something called One Country Project. There was a lot of urging to call it the Rural Democratic Project. I called it One Country because I believe that if we do not start speaking with one voice on important issues in this country, we're going to become ungovernable. So I'm not just trying to speak to rural voters. I'm trying to find that connective tissue that connects all of us in the body politic, that makes it possible, even if we disagree on the margins, to actually move this country forward. And so we think that, or I can let Joe speak to his involvement, but I think that what I'm trying to do is redefine in a broader bandwidth what is in fact a Democrat. Because if you looked at our race, the single greatest obstacle to us winning re-election was that we are identified with the Democratic Party. All rise. Hey, Joseph, how are you?
How are you, brother?
This is Claire's
Claire
husband,
McCaskill.
and much better half, let me tell you.
Very talented. Delighted to meet you. Thank you. There you go.
Hey, sweetie. How are you? I'm good.
Hello,
Hi,
Senator.
Larry.
How are you?
Nice to
Give
see
you a
you.
hug too. Thank you
Sure.
so much. Please have a seat.
Anyway, just to kind of finish up that thought, the idea would be to simply reconnect, find out what those issues are, and turn the dial. Now, the important part that you need to know, and I'm sure Larry can back this up, that if we don't do better in rural areas, if we don't change the brand in rural areas, we certainly can't win the Senate back as Democrats, and we may not be able to win the presidency because of the Electoral College. And so what I will tell you, based on our analysis, the Democratic presidential candidate could win the popular vote by 7% if you look at trends and still lose the presidency. Because we have to start building back. And one of in the good news piece, we saw some bounce in rural areas in 2018. especially in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, where places were critically important to re-electing or to electing a Democratic president. But we're starting to see it in places like Virginia. We're starting to see it in places like Kentucky. And we're hoping that there will be lessons. We're going to do a comparison between the North Carolina special election and the Kentucky elections. And what you're going to see is in North Carolina, Dan McGreedy lost because he did not do better in 2000 in his special election than rural areas in that district did. He grossly outperformed in the urban and suburban areas, but actually lost more votes in the rural areas, consequently lost his race. And so this has got a mandate in terms of the work we're doing, a mandate in terms of winning elections, but a mandate also in terms of governing this country and bringing a broader message that we can all get behind.
Well, I was going to say, the other part of this is a saying, Heidi's heard me say it, and it was created by somebody else, but it really was my brand, which is, we don't care how much you know until we know how much you care. So I was the first senator that went to all 92 counties in our state every single year, because Greene County deserves just as much as Marion County, where Indianapolis is, to see their senator, to talk to their senator, to tell them the issues that they have. And as long as the election was about Senator Joe, we were just rolling. When it became a litmus Democrat-Republican test, then everything falls away. And so the effort on the other side is always to paint it as they don't have faith or family or country or immigration they're wrong, on guns they're wrong, on abortion they're wrong. And so those cultural issues are where the wedge comes in. And getting to meet you and know who you are. I served on the Agriculture Committee for 12 years, wrote 3 farm bills. No one else from Long Island has ever wrote 3 farm bills, or who grew up on Long Island. I am from Indiana. But those issues, I would go simply to tell him, look, I'm a person of faith, a person of family, who loves his country, just like you do. And we're in the same place on all of these things. You've been driven away from hearing that. You hear it on Fox News every night the other way. I'm here to tell you, this is who we really are. We're Hoosiers Democrats who love our country, who believe strongly in faith and family, and we want to share that message.
I'm going to take a pause right here because I would like to introduce Senator McCaskill. Senator, they said many nice things about you.
I don't believe you.
While we were waiting, and there's no need
We
for
talked
me to
about how we had to constantly fill in the gaps for you, Claire, because
Yeah,
you never show up.
right.
They did say nice things.
Good.
On the whole. But I would like to introduce you if I can, and we're so pleased to have you as
Thank
well,
you.
Senator. And you served, of course, 2 terms in the Senate. You're a native of Missouri, and you were in the Senate from 2007 until earlier this year. You were the first woman elected senator from Missouri. Before being elected to the Senate, you worked as a prosecutor before winning a seat in the State House of Representatives, and in 1992, you became the first woman elected county prosecutor for Jackson County, Missouri. In 2006, you won the seat. You were expected to face a tough re-election in 2012, but you easily defeated your Republican candidate. For some reason, Senator Schumer, it was a caucus gathering of Democrats from the Senate. I don't know whether any of you were here at it, but it was held in, I think it was 2011, end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And Senator Schumer was showing a bunch of senators around, and he wanted to show them through a pavilion, so they came into Pavilion 4. And for some reason, maybe you were there, I don't know, you weren't in Pavilion 4, but instead of asking about the pavilion, he went to every senator and said, we have just got to re-elect Claire McCaskill. I don't know what hold you had over him, but he didn't listen to another word that we said the entire time. But nonetheless, he loved you. I just want you to know that. I guess he still does. Let me see. And of course, Missouri became increasingly conservative, which fits quite into our theme of how to make the Democratic Party more appealing in red states. Although, Missouri wasn't that red for so long, and then suddenly it got redder and redder. Same with Indiana. I guess North Dakota used to elect Democratic senators regularly. So we want to get into that in a second. We did discuss Michael Bloomberg jumping into the presidential race, which he's just done.
Well, that'll be great in rural America. Can't wait for him to come to Missouri and tell us how big our Slurpees can be.
That's it, man. That sums it up in one sentence.
That's good. But we're not going to get back on him unless you want to make a comment about it.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
He'll probably hear about this. He's a friend and he's been a supporter of mine, so.
So you're going to let it go for the time being?
I'm going to let it go. That's all I'll say.
All right. Let's talk about the key question, though, while you all three are here, because you've seen the change. You were successfully elected through a string of years when Republicans did fairly well nationally, but you managed to swim against the tide. What has happened? What are the fundamental factors that have pushed Democrats out of competition in red states? And really, why have the letters D and R become the most significant letters of the English language, at least in politics?
Well, I don't think it's as bad as we think it is. I do think Joe hit on the biggest problem, which was that there became, when I first came to the Missouri legislature, I'm older than dirt, and when I first came to the Missouri legislature, I was in my late 20s. I was in public office for almost 38 years in Missouri. When I first got elected in my late 20s to the State House of Representatives, there were a lot of conservative Democrats. We controlled the House and the Senate in Missouri. Hey, Liz. We controlled, but these were conservative guys mostly, some women, but mostly guys, and they were very conservative about guns. They were very conservative about abortion. They were very conservative about a lot of what we like to brand in politics cultural issues. And as we began fighting those issues, and you all won't remember this, but Missouri was the only state to defeat the NRA in a statewide ballot referendum on carry conceal. We had a Democratic governor who kept vetoing conceal and carry, and so the NRA was cocky and thought, well, we'll just come in and run it as a ballot initiative, and we defeated them. When I was in the auditor's office in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that issue, because obviously the cities voted big no, and the rural areas voted big yes, that kind of was a moment where there was a cleaving in our state, where rural voters began to think, well, they don't get us, and urban voters began to think, well, they don't get us. And we did not do a good job as a party to continue to focus on what our dear friend Barbara Mikulski used to call not macroeconomics, but macaroni and cheese economics. Right. Those family economic issues that our party is really much better at for people who aren't wealthy. Helping those people that are on the margins. And there's just as many as those folks, all of you that are political science professors and do demographics, there are just as many people dependent on Medicaid in rural areas as there are in the urban areas of Missouri. And we have a bunch of big urban areas. So I think us failing to continue to focus on economic issues along with the cleaving on cultural issues kind of switched my state around where it's become really, I did the same thing Joe did. I did 50 town halls in 2017. 50! That's a lot, and they were mostly places where people didn't like me very much. So,
that's where you go. That's right.
But, Trump camped out in Indiana and Missouri, and it made it about him. And one thing the three of us have in common, We are 3 of the states that, as of this morning, Donald Trump still has a positive approval rating in all 3 of our states.
On the last night before election, the night before, his next to last rally was in Indiana with Mike Pence.
Yeah.
And his last rally was in Missouri with Mike Pence and with Sean Hannity.
Oh, wait. We had more than that. We had the weird
I know.
woman judge, whatever her name is, and Sean Hannity, and we had Rush Limbaugh, and we had, we had Lee Greenwood. I mean, it was quite the clown car on the night before the election.
Okay. Senator Donnelly, tell us, and I want to hear from Senator Heitkamp too, because I know they felt confident about North Dakota, meaning that the Republican would win, but I know they were all up there in lots of different ways. How do you combat that? What do you say and do, not to Sean Hannity, but to a president coming in, and as we know, he's not shackled to the truth, so he can pretty much say whatever he'd like. How do you respond? How can you get your message across in the face of that?
Well, here was the numbers. We received more votes, or I received more votes in a midterm in the state of Indiana on election day than any Democrat in the history of the state, or at least in the last 40 years that I looked at. Our modeling, really good modeling, said the next highest was 840,000 votes. And so I challenged everybody on the team. I said, we're going to hit 1 million. And we're going to go to every town and find everybody through all of the information that we have and do this. We wound up with almost 1,050,000. So like 200,000 more than any Democrat in a midterm in history before. But Trump's rallies are the things that get people out. He was in Claire and Heidi's state as well, 6 times in Indiana in the last month and a half. And not one of them was in Indianapolis. It was in Evansville and Fort Wayne and all around the state, strategically placed. And the message was, I think he even called my opponent's name was Mike Braun. I may be wrong on this, but I think one night he called him Mike Brown. Because that, that person wasn't central to this deal. It was the president and Joe. And the message was, immigration and the caravans and Kavanaugh. And for a month and a half, that was the nonstop message. And the final part of the message was, if you don't come out and vote, you are betraying me, Donald Trump. And so that's how it was personalized. And that was the challenge. We got more votes than anybody had ever gotten, but it still was a little bit shy.
So it was mainly Trump, but of course the Kavanaugh controversy, confirmation, intervened right in the middle of that election. What did your private polls show? What effect did that have in your states?
The day that, I'll never forget the day I was in my office with a national news outlet, and there was a quiet moment in this interview, and all of a sudden you could hear somebody in my office say, I won't say it because it's a bad word, but it was, oh, blankety blank, 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 really loud, and I was terribly embarrassed. And I thought, what in the world is going on the other side of the wall? And I walked out, and Kennedy had resigned. The minute Kennedy resigned, I knew I was in big, big, big trouble. Because I knew this would, at that point in time, our numbers were just like Joe's. Yeah. At that point in time, our enthusiasm level was running 7 to 10 points higher than Republicans. Everybody was going to vote. I felt like our turnout model was really strong. We knocked on more doors in my campaign than any campaign in the country. I knew that we would outperform. We did the same thing Joe did. We absolutely hung the moon in the blue areas of the state. But what happened was the Kavanaugh controversy And here's the thing about the Kavanaugh controversy. I don't think it was so much that I voted yes. It may have been different for Heidi and Joe. The problem was the whole thing was just messy. And you know what it did to most people? It made them think Washington sucks. Whether you were against Kavanaugh or for Kavanaugh, for a lot of voters that go back and forth and vote between Democrats and Republicans, it was one more example of how messed up, because it looked chaotic and sloppy and ugly. And so one of the biggest things I had going against me was in any other job in the world, the more you do it and the higher you go up in your chosen profession, the better it is. Not in politics anymore. I was really hurt by the fact that I'd done it for a long time. I'd gotten pretty good at it, but that didn't matter. I'd done it for a long time. I was the ultimate insider. My opponent was the ultimate outsider. And of course, nobody wears the outsider collar more bizarrely than our own president. So, you know, it is this outsider-insider dynamic. It is no longer helpful to be an incumbent. It is not, I mean, you guys might disagree with me that have looked at the numbers, but if right now, you know what the DCCC is doing all over the country? They're looking to find candidates who've never run for office before. If you're a state senator that's been around for a while, have a voting record, God forbid that you've been in office for, 3 decades like I had, that's not who they want to run. They want somebody who's a veteran or a nurse or someone who's been out working in a profession that is highly respected, not somebody who's hung around politics for most of their adult life. That really hurt me.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was doing an interview with agricultural TV back in Indiana, all the different stations. We would do that on a regular basis. And at the end of the interview, I said, "Thanks, everybody." And one of the reporters goes, "Hey, you got time for one more question?" I said, "Sure." He said, "What do you think about Justice Kennedy just announcing his retirement?" And they show me going like this. Because just like Claire, I knew. This was the one thing I watched like a hawk. Absent this, there was really no path at that point in the campaign for the fellow who was running against me, because we had tried in every way. It's like you put a game plan together. I'll blanket this, I'll blanket that, we'll run this way, we'll do this. And everything was firing on all pistons. And we were watching this because it basically came down, his timing did, almost to the last hour of the last day, because somebody had to hire clerks and all of those kind of things. So you know where the window closes. And we were just about there. And when that happened, I thought, oh boy. That's not excellent. Sure. But that was the one thing that we thought could change the game. But I actually think that's why it was done.
I mean, by Kennedy?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why it was done.
I wish somebody would write that book.
Yeah, well, somebody
Expose Kennedy for the Trump supporter he is.
And do you think they coordinated behind the scenes?
Yes. Yep.
Who coordinated? The White House and
I think
Kennedy?
Kennedy went in to talk to Trump, and
his
they
son
cut a
works
deal.
there, I think.
Yeah.
And they knew these races
Kennedy made it known. Plus, Kennedy's son works for Deutsche Bank. Not that I'm a conspiracy theorist.
I love conspiracies.
No, seriously. There's a whole story behind the Kennedy resignation. And trust me, Clarence Thomas is maybe ready to just time the next one.
Yeah.
And so just understand that in order for the Supreme Court to be in play again in this next election, having a vacancy in the Supreme Court will do more to gin up his base than almost anything. And so Democrats consistently have not voted the court because we enjoy the status quo, right? If in fact Roe v. Wade would ever be reversed by the Supreme Court, all of a sudden the Supreme Court would be our voting issue, right? But the Justice Kennedy resignation, all of us had the same reaction. I told my staff, I said, the only way I know I can't win is if Kennedy resigns, or if we have a Supreme Court vacancy, because you didn't know if one of the liberals would, something would happen with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So this wasn't unanticipated by any of the campaigns. It just then turned messy. And to give you a sense of how bad this was, I was in campaigning the last month of the campaign, and I was in a small town, and there was a doctor there who came up to me and said, I think you're a great senator. I think you've done a great job. I think you're really a good person, but I'm not voting for you. And I said, well, why? And he said, because you're one of the mob. You're one of the mob. Yeah. And that's what they saw was this chaotic kind of rollout that then told them, look, we don't like that. And Donald Trump fanned those flames. The Republican Party fanned those flames, and
and our party was incompetent.
Right.
She said the Democrats were incompetent. Yeah. See, this is a balance panel. And it's going back and forth.
The reason I say we were incompetent is that the information about the allegation against Kavanaugh should have never been held until the 11th hour. Right. Because then it gave the appearance of a kneecapping. And that didn't seem fair. So for people who weren't looking at it carefully, it looked like that at the 11th hour, when this man was about to have a vote, all of a sudden they make this very serious allegation against him, and it was from something that happened when he was in high school. So even though all of us voted against Kavanaugh, and I'm proud of that vote, I'm not ashamed of it, I think it was the right thing to do. But you need to realize, for people who weren't following it closely, it looked like this was ginned up. That information should have been given, and we give confidential information to the FBI all the time. Doesn't mean it becomes public. You wouldn't believe all the things the FBI looks into when they are doing background checks. This should have been given to the FBI weeks before this happened. And then we wouldn't have had that mob chaos thing at the end. May not have turned out any differently, but there was a real mistake made on the Judiciary Committee how it was handled by the Democrats.
And to give you an idea in terms of the vote itself, as Claire said, did the yes or the no cause the win or the loss? Joe Manchin was ahead by 13, or right in that neighborhood the day before. West Virginia, the day before the Kavanaugh hearing started. He voted yes, and he won by 2. And so it was the mess, the mob, the fact they had this information 3 months before.
He would have lost if he'd voted no, too.
Yeah.
Didn't you tell, I don't want to reveal your private polls, but can you share with them what happened in your polling?
We were significantly ahead the day before the hearing started, and significantly behind the day after the hearings ended. And so you worked nonstop to try to get back up. And as we were, what I also think happened is I think somebody went to the president. I think they went to the president and said, you know how the House was won, right? I think they went and said, the Democrats are going to win the House. You have to save the Senate. This is where you have to go. And that full-on message, people were going, well, with this full-on message, he lost House seats. They had already done their numbers, and they weren't going to win it. And so they said, just be full-on Trump in these places and save the Senate.
And it worked. Added seats. I'm going to ask you about one other thing that what you said about Clarence Thomas. It's very interesting. I can't reveal who called me to tell me, but it's somebody close to the court and indicated that Clarence Thomas would probably retire next fall.
Yeah, of course.
That message had been carried forth. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't have regular consultations with Clarence Thomas, so I can't tell you. But it's the same pattern that you just said. Yeah, he doesn't talk much. That's true, even in private.
They ran this play once.
Yeah, it worked.
And it worked. And they'll run the play again.
Well, this is very interesting. And now you got a whole auditorium full of people who believe in the conspiracy. So I think,
There you go.
And it may, sometimes it's true.
I don't think we weren't. I don't think we were talking conspiracy when we said you know, it wasn't by accident that he resigned at the time he did, and that was a plan.
All right, I've got to bring up one other topic before we go to questions. They have a lot of questions for you. You're getting all the softballs, so impeachment. I want to know, you're former senators, you were there for quite a few years, and you got 24 years together. Given that the House, let's just assume the House does impeach, because I think that's very, very likely. If you disagree, please let me know. But it goes to the Senate from there. What will happen? What do you think? Is there any possibility at all, even a tiny one, that 20 Republicans will vote to oust Donald Trump? What will happen?
Can I just point out, there's an intermediate question, which is, does Mitch McConnell have the votes to shut it down? Because by that I mean, can he get 50 votes for what in the legal profession we'd call a motion to dismiss, and just shut it down and there's no trial? He doesn't have, I don't think Romney's going to go with him, and he's got to pick up 2 or 3 more. And so I would just suggest that that's kind of a threshold question that needs to be asked.
I don't think he's even going to try. I don't think he wants to.
I think he will.
I think he believes that if he does a motion to dismiss successfully, then the perception switches on him. And it looks like he's trying to not allow a trial. And I think he's much better off letting the trial occur.
And Claire, I would say that unless, you know, what's in the super secret box? What don't we know already? And
The
I think
server in the White House?
And I think that it's going to depend on, I think it's going to, whether he does this is going to depend on whether he thinks the spectacle of a trial benefits him more or less.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, in the law, and we're all lawyers, and Claire and I both were prosecutors, you know, that the thing that you've got to always think about when you're doing a case like this is, what don't I know? And none of those senators are thinking about that, in my opinion, because they assume they know all the facts. There's a lot of stuff here they don't know, and that's going to historically come back to bite them. But I think will make a big difference on how Mitch handles the impeachment trial.
I don't know what you think, Joe. I think high water mark would be 10 Republicans voting to remove. Low water mark would be Susan Collins and Mitt Romney.
Lisa might.
You know, maybe Lisa. But I think,
McCaskill.
you know,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4. So, you know, the question is, will we get over the majority of the Senate voting to remove him? If we do, you know, if we get 51, 52, then I think it is less difficult for this to be a positive for our party going into next November. If it's a strictly party line vote, if nobody breaks, and that's what Mitch is working towards. I had one of my former colleagues tell me 2 weeks ago, watch the House. If the impeachment vote is party line, chances go dramatically up in the Senate that it is strict party line.
And when you look at this vote, I don't think that the Speaker wanted to be doing impeachment. I think that, you know, you heard a lot of the Democratic base going, impeach him, impeach him, impeach him. I think it's the last thing she wanted. Moderates like Abigail Spanberger from Virginia don't need to be dealing with this. But I think they also looked and they said, we have a constitutional obligation. I was asked about what happened with Ukraine and the conversation that took place, where the president said, we'd really like you to do us a favor. No. And in looking at that, I said, as a juror, I want to hear all the information first. So I can't tell you what I would do as a juror in the Senate. But I will tell you this. If I had done that as a senator, I would be convicted and expelled from the Senate. And I know that in regards to things like, if I ever went to a donor and said, look, I need you to do me a favor, and in return, you'll get this. We go to jail for that. And we well understand that, to the point where probably all of us at some point in our offices have said, whoa, stop this conversation. Sir, we're done talking about these issues. You have to leave my office right now.
You mean in the sense they're offering you a campaign contribution?
Yeah, well, if they come in and they go, I got the most amazing water rights company, and I want to contribute to your campaign. It's just like, whoop, done. That's why we always have people with us. Because if something is ever said about this, we have someone standing next to us who can say, oh no, Joe told him, please leave, I'm going to start running the other direction, don't follow me. And just on that, it's clear to me if those facts are true, and we'll see that in the evidence that comes forward, I would go to jail for that. And so as we look forward to this, I don't think the speaker wanted to do this, but I think she looked at the facts and said, I have no choice anymore. And I think that the moderate Democrats have said the same thing. We don't want to be an Abigail Spanberger. I haven't talked to her, but I'm sure this is the last thing she wanted to deal with. But she will deal with it because it's her constitutional obligation.
But the reason why it's here is because she signed a letter.
Yeah.
So all you understand that. She's not the victim here. I think Nancy was holding on to the door, and then once all of this stuff happened, she couldn't hold it back anymore. Once the moderates started saying it's an act of conscience for the democracy that we live in. It is.
I mean, let's celebrate the fact that this is working the way it's supposed to work. That people who are going to have political consequences for taking a stand on impeaching this president are doing the right thing. I got to tell you, the thing that's most amazing for me is that I actually thought I was going to be miserable when I left office. I'm really, really happy. I am so happy I feel guilty. I do not regret voting yes on Kavanaugh, no on Kavanaugh. I don't regret any of it. I don't regret all the votes I took that got me in trouble. And the people that are there now should feel the same way. And what's so sad about this is that our Republican colleagues know it. They know it. The majority of them know these are impeachable offenses. They know this man should be removed from office, but the political consequences for them are so severe, they will take their place in the history books as the party that folded in front of unprecedented wrongdoing in the Oval Office that was documented and factual. And I think it's very, very sad. I feel for them. I want to go to all of them and say, come on out, it's fine. Do the right thing. You will live to tell about it, Lindsay. You can get another life.
I'm not sure he'd take your call, but you might want to try that.
Not since I've been on Twitter about him, he won't. We used to be friends before he lost his mind.
One thing on impeachment is, and this is more critical of their message, they needed to get to the so what defense a lot sooner. Because the more they say it didn't happen, the more they want to out the whistleblower, the more they blow smoke. That's all cover for them. Because they know if they admit this happened, that they are really like the worst kind of political animal that will turn their back on this kind of corruption and not do the right thing. And so it's really confusing to me on where they're going to end up, because they might as well right now go to a defense of so what.
Yeah.
Because the evidence and the facts are so overwhelming. What we know reading these transcripts, and I know all of us have been following and reading because we have to talk about it in various settings. Let me tell you, I would kill for this case.
Me too.
As a prosecutor.
Me too.
Any one of us would. We would kill to have an open and shut. You wouldn't even get to trial in a normal kind of environment. I mean, it would be a plea bargain. And so the Republicans are going to get to so what. And then it's going to be what Joni Ernst had at her town hall. I don't know how many of you saw that.
This was a great
There was a
moment.
great moment in American kind of, because Joni's not used to anyone criticizing
This was the
her.
heart of democracy, is what it was.
So, and she's not, she came up from the State House, you know, kind of won against a candidate that really didn't reflect Iowa values. And so she's had it pretty easy. And all of a sudden, some woman, you'd never expect this woman to be the tough questioner. She's looking at her thinking she's probably a Trump person, calls on her, and she stands up and she goes, Senator, I want to know where the line is.
Yeah, it was like, what would it take?
What would it take? Where's the line? I just need to know where the line is. And that's a question every American should be asking, every senator who's a Republican who's turning their back on this, every congressman who's a Republican. Where is the line? When does it become your obligation as a citizen, never mind your obligation as an elected official, but your obligation as a citizen to defend this democracy? Where's the line? And that should be our mantra. Where's the line? Tell me, you know, he had somebody arguing in district court in New York that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
No, the president had somebody representing him in court in New York saying, yes, you couldn't prosecute him if he shot someone on Fifth Avenue.
Morning TV the other day, I think it was CNN, had they were going person on the street interviews, and they were going up to people who were Trump supporters, and they went up to this one lady who said, I love him, I think he's great. Well, what would happen if he came on this street and shot somebody? Would you still back him? And she says, well, I'm sure he'd have a good reason. Yes, I'd stand right by him. So what can you do in those circumstances?
Yeah,
You're not going to
He's got
do him.
25% of the country locked up.
Yeah, at least. All right, now I'm going to go to some questions. Again, they will be polite because that's just the way it is. I'm going to start with you, and we're going to go around here. You're second, boom. Tell them who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Amari John. I'm a second year here at the University of Virginia, and I had a question about...
Where are you from?
Oh, from Dover, Delaware originally.
He's for Biden. He told me that.
I have a question that's recently been brought up by Donald Trump, Elizabeth Warren, even Bernie Sanders. It's about the filibuster. A lot of people believe in the Senate that it is just used to slow down the legislative process, to kill bills before anything can actually, any real discussion can actually happen. As 3 senators, as Mr. Zabato said, of 24 years of experience, do you guys believe that the filibuster is still necessary?
Well, I will just tell you that we have stopped a lot of bad stuff. When the Republicans had the White House, the House, and the Senate, think about the legislation that would have landed on Trump's desk. Think about it. I mean, we would have had all kinds of, the times that we stood shoulder to shoulder stopping the defunding of Planned Parenthood. We never, that's because they didn't have 60 votes. They had 50 sometimes, but they didn't have 60. So what happens when you're frustrated, your stuff's not getting done, you think, oh, well, if we get rid of the filibuster, our stuff will get done. Well, there's no guarantee. When we changed the rule on how many votes it took for presidential cabinet members and for circuit judges, it felt pretty good when Obama was getting through his circuit judges and his cabinet members. It felt really bad when we went to 51 votes for a Supreme Court justice. But we did that. And if you do it on a filibuster, when there's not a Democrat in the White House, or there's not, there is absolutely anybody who thinks the Democrats are going to be in charge forever has not read enough history. So, and all of you that are at the University of Virginia, especially you students, you've read plenty of history if you're probably in this room. So I just think that's not the right way to do it. Now, we may end up with a third party over this because the cynicism is going to grow so much if we don't get Mitch McConnell out of there. I'm all for, this is going to get me in trouble, but I'm all for bringing younger people into leadership in Congress I mean, I think the average age of leadership in Congress is 79, 80.
That's not too old.
The entire leadership team in the House are, near 80. It's old. And I think, maybe doing some term limits on leadership and busting up the kind of power, because the power right now is so concentrated in the leaders in both houses. And that contributes to this problem. But I would not be in favor of doing it because I know the harm that could come to the things I care deeply about if we throw it away because it seems like the right thing to do. And frankly, most of the people who think it's a good thing to do are either ignorant, like Donald Trump, or they're running for president.
The flip side of this, the positive side, is that when you need 60 votes, you build a consensus, and that consensus tends to hold, a much longer, and it represents more of the interest of the country. We can accomplish a lot of change that you want to accomplish with the filibuster with simple rules changes in the House.
Right.
And that goes to attacking leadership. Right now, leadership has total control. I used to argue, I'd say, they want all these amendments because they want everybody to vote on their batshit crazy ideas, right? So I said, how about we do this? We have batshit crazy Wednesday, when you can put anything on the calendar and we'll vote on it. If I get Fix-It Friday, and that means that bills that are really good bills that only can go if you put them on the floor or if they go unanimous consent and you're up against Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, who have stopped more good pieces of legislation that all of us had huge support for.
Don't leave out Rand.
Yeah. Rand Paul.
Don't leave him
sorry. Anyway, so if you had a special way to move consensus legislation that wouldn't be unanimous but would be supermajority, you'd have a lot more things happening and positive stuff happening in this country.
Rules reform.
Rules need change.
I also served in the House. And for a number of years when we were there and the House was controlled by Paul Ryan and others, we stopped, as Claire said, so much crazy stuff just by being able to say, look, this is just not going to move. And I'll never forget them crying nonstop. Well, if it wasn't for those folks, we'd get this, and we'd get this, and we'd get this. And I go, that is exactly right. We are going to stop that, and that, and that. And the other part is, our founders, if there's one thing, I guess they're all from, or a big number were from Virginia.
The good ones.
Yeah.
The good ones, yeah.
I will tell you that Abraham Lincoln grew up as a boy in Indiana. And so we take credit for him, even though Illinois tries too.
He was not.
Yeah.
He was not a founder.
He was not a founder.
Just in case. Just wanted to make sure you knew that.
I appreciate the advice.
All right. I know you've missed me. I know you've missed me. Correct.
I was like,
that.
Claire's coming, man. I don't know. We love Claire. But when you look at this, part of their genius was, we don't need two houses of representatives. The role of the Senate is to sit and think about these things and to work through them and to try to put together coalitions. Look, Senator McConnell has made it clear he doesn't want coalitions on certain things when he's in the minority. It's just no. And when he's in the majority, it's just we're not even going to do our constitutional job of putting forward a nomination for a Supreme Court vote. We're just not going to even do that. And so those are abuses of how the system was, those are abuses of what the founders expected us to do. They expected us to behave better. But because we don't behave better as a Senate, shouldn't be a reason that we change who we're supposed to be in their eyes.
Yeah. That's a great point, and made in the right place.
Yes.
Right here. All right, I called on somebody. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Bob Toplin, retired historian, and my birthplace was a hospital in Philadelphia. So anyway, I'm here. I think you really hit a central point that's on the minds of all of us. How are Republicans in the Senate thinking about all this when they know that we've got such a terrible problem here, and yet they're thinking, I can't be a hero. I can't step up and really speak up because of what? What are they thinking about? What will be the consequences if they really turn quite brave?
I was with Jeff Flake maybe a month ago. He came to Notre Dame. And, you know, Jeff is a person, Jeff retired. Well, Jeff, in a perfect world, would not have wanted to retire. But here is somebody who spoke his conscience about the president and wasn't like extreme or anything. He just said, I don't agree with you on this or on this. And the next thing he knows, he's tweeted about nonstop. He's trashed by the president. They find a person to run against him in the primary, and he looks up, and he's 14 points behind in a Republican primary in Arizona to somebody nobody's ever really heard of before. It's just the alternate to the person that Donald Trump doesn't like. And so Jeff Flake looks up and goes, I can't get there anymore because I spoke my conscience.
Yeah, they get beat.
Yeah, they get beat.
Especially if they're in red states. The only ones we'd have a shot with are the ones that need to appeal to voters who are not in the tank for Trump. And I saw a Morning Consult thing this morning that was frightening to me, that not only is his approval rating among Republicans still in the stratosphere, I think it's 80, 85%, that it was like 78% of the Republicans said that they thought Donald Trump had made the Republican Party better. Not worse, better. So there is a real fear on the part of people that I think would do the right thing, that they are no longer recognizing their party.
Yeah,
and they either have to get with it or get out. And it's just a simple political calculation. Now, maybe some of them, especially ones that are retiring, like Johnny Isaacson or maybe Lamar Alexander, that are not going to run again, maybe they rise to the occasion. We can hope, but
I think you have to put them in three categories. Honestly, the people who are so with him, they're in the tank, they are true believers, they're disciples to this Masonic guy.
And that's very few senators, don't you think?
Oh yeah,
very few senators are in that tank.
I mean, the guy who replaced me, the guy who replaced you, maybe. My guy is much more like in the tank for Trump. And so you've got a group there that they believe, true believers. And then you got the cowards who just sit and hide, and that would be somebody else that I know pretty well, that I served with, many of them. And then you've got the institutional guys like Lamar. And I'll tell you why I think Lamar won't vote to impeach even though he knows better, because the election is too close. I think that they justify not taking that role as saying, okay, I don't have to remove him. The people can look at this and make a judgment. And so the jury pool is much bigger in their mind. And so I think you have to really understand that it's not one monolith and that they're afraid of losing or not winning. I think that there's different motivation for different people in different categories.
If I could just mention one statistic, the one that, so I'm the grandson of immigrants, the fifth of five. And the clearest message my parents gave to me was education, 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 education. And basically, my dad said, if you don't go to college, I'll kill you. He was not a touchy-feely dad, but they took a poll of the Republican base, and 59% said they felt that colleges and universities were a negative for America. And that's one of the things that I think, like a Fox News, if of the things they've done, one of the things they've done that's such a disservice is to put down education, which is the kernel of everything. I think of the mom or dad in inner city DC or Baltimore who's working a second and third job so their son or daughter can go to college. That person's a hero. And this is one of the greatest perversions that has come forward is the attack on education, because look, a place like UVA, what it's done for the world, these are places where diseases are cured, where historical presidents have come from, and I think it's one of the biggest perversions that we've seen.
Okay, let me see. Let me get some diversity here. I'm looking for a UVA woman.
UVA woman.
Just to be blunt about it.
There's one right in the middle.
Boom, boom. Thank you.
I'm Aubrey. I'm an incoming grad student. There's a lot of progressive policies that poll very well among the court of public opinion, criminal justice reform, that kind of things. But when Democrats try to pass them, they get steamrolled by the Republican, messaging machine. So my question is, like, how do the Democrats as a party get beyond this inability to message popular policies in a way that makes them supported in the court of public opinion?
Whoa. Well, there is some realities about messaging that everybody needs to understand, and that is simple and negative works better than complicated and positive. And if you look at when we've really gotten, like, for example, the Affordable Care Act, it wasn't until everybody felt like they were going to lose it that it became finally net positive. And I'd come home from Washington every weekend and my husband would say, well, why aren't you explaining it? I go, we are explaining it till we're blue in the face. But government taking over your health care is much simpler than, well, everybody's going to go to a marketplace, and if you can't afford it, you'll never have to pay more than 9%. And by the way, there's going to be a list of rules about insurance companies, and and then there's going to be a risk pool, and by the time we were all wonky and finished explaining it, they'd moved on, and it was government's taking over your health care. Government's going to tell you what to do. And I will tell you that some of the progressive policies, there are experts in this room, but you can ask a question. Let me give you a good example. Medicare for all. This is going to be a big issue in this campaign, right? And I'm betting that there might be a lot of people in this room that think Medicare for all is in fact the answer. I would ask at my town halls for everybody to raise their hand if they wanted Medicare for all. And almost everybody would raise their hand. And then I'd say, now all of you that have raised your hand, keep your hand up if you get insurance at work or you have a private Medicare Advantage plan. And most of the hands would stay up. I said, now keep your hand up if you're okay with that being taken away and you getting whatever insurance the government says you can have. And all of a sudden they'd go, what? Well, that's not Medicare for all. I go, no, that's Medicare for all. No more private insurance. You get what the government gives you. And even though there are really good arguments about taking the profit out of the silos of healthcare that have been too high, that will be a very, very unpopular thing. And that's how it will be sold to those voters who aren't crazy about Donald Trump, but were convinced Hillary Clinton was a bad woman. And they are willing to vote for the Democrat, but this will scare the bejesus out of some of them. That all of a sudden, especially union guys who have given up wages for 30 years to get Cadillac healthcare plans, and we're going to say to them, never mind, you don't get the wages and now you don't get your plan. You get whatever the government gives you. And that's the problem, that it is hard when you really flip it to the negative for those numbers on, if you ask those questions on polling, should profit be taken out of Medicare, out of healthcare, and everybody get insurance and not have to worry about access or co-pays or deductibles? Well, everybody's for that. That's like mom apple pie and sugar every day for breakfast. But if you say the government's going to control what you get when you get it, and you've got no other choice, it becomes a completely different animal. That's why many of us are worried about that being a central platform of the Democratic nominee.
Do you two agree with Claire on that?
I agree with her 100% on that. I worry about Medicare for all as the position because I know what will happen in swing states. I know what the ads are going to be. And the ads are, they're going to take away your health care and give you just whatever the government cooks up. And that alone will be such a huge amount of people that you'll lose. There was a poll that just came out today or yesterday, signifying in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin and in Michigan that Medicare for all, when explained that you will no longer have private coverage, is extraordinarily unpopular. And we can't, this is the kind of thing that you have to run your plays, you have to run them right, it's gonna be close, and you can't afford a fumble. This is a fumble in the game at a critical time. And I worry,
You know what really makes me mad about all this? No one in the Democratic Party should be talking about any of this.
Yeah.
You know how the conversation should go?
Pre-existing.
Pre-existing conditions and drug prices.
We are all in agreement on one thing, that if we re-elect Donald Trump, millions of people in this country will no longer have health insurance because it's already happening. Children are losing health insurance. Older people, Medicare or Medicaid expansion will be gone. Then you start telling them what the consequences are of electing Donald Trump. And then we argue policy after we get ourselves in the position to win an election.
And what we've done is taken the most winning position, what the three of us pounded away every day on our campaign. The best position we had
given it away.
was, you have a pre-existing condition, my opponent's taking your health care away. And we've thrown it away.
In fact, Claire's opponent was trying to do it because he was the state attorney general who filed one of the lawsuits.
Yeah, I bet he lied.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Who are you? Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm Nick Fisher. I'm a first year from New Jersey. So thank you for coming to UVA. So my question is going back to the topic of connecting with rural voters. Beto, when he was still in the race, went on CNN and said that under an O'Rourke administration, we're going to get rid of tax exemptions for churches that don't agree with same-sex marriage. That destroys your chances, I think, with a lot of rural voters who the faith is the most important thing in their life. So is that a line that Democrats can't cross? What's your take on it?
I just think that Beto has no business telling a church what they can believe and what they can't believe. All of a sudden, Beto's determining when they can get a tax exemption and when they can't. That's crazy. And you're attacking at the heart of what people have inside of them, their faith, their family. And so whether you agree with that church or not, you can't be in the business of taking their tax exemption away.
What happens if someone said, we're going to take away your exemption if you're Muslim?
Same deal.
Where do you draw the line on that deal?
What happens if they're going to take away your tax exemption because you can't have the fish fry on Friday night at the Catholic Church? You have no chance of winning that.
Or bingo. That's the worst part. Bingo.
On Friday.
All right.
It's not the same as same-sex marriage. We're not trying to diminish that.
Thank you, Senators. You referred to...
Name, where are you from?
My name is Tommy. I'm a first year intending to major in politics.
Where are you from?
I'm from Arlington, right across from the swamp.
Reliably blue Arlington now.
Reliably blue Arlington. So the Supreme Court is currently 5-4 Republican Democrat. You referred to the possibility of a vacancy in the upcoming election. What is at stake if there's a vacancy in the 2020 elections?
Everything.
Yeah, I think so too.
Everything. Same-sex marriage, the right of a woman to legally obtain an abortion in this country, all the things that they campaign on the far right as was the downfall of our country. Everything's at stake. If it becomes a 6-3, then there is no need to try to hold on to some kind of middle, which I think Roberts is, gamely trying to do, but we'll see what happens on these abortion cases that are up there. Watch Kavanaugh on the abortion cases. Susan Collins is convinced that he will not overturn precedent.
Well,
And he knows if he does, he defeats her. And she was a pretty key vote for him. So that's when all of a sudden the Supreme Court becomes personal.
Okay, this young lady.
My name is Sandy. I'm a fourth year, and I'm from Newark, New Jersey, where Cory Booker is. So my question is, you talked about how it always seems like Congress can never get anything done, and there's this thing about Mitch McConnell burying, turning his office into a graveyard and burying all of the bills that are trying to get passed in the House of Representatives. So my question is, since you guys were senators for 20-something years, what are 3 reform in Congress, in both the House and the Senate, that you think needs to be implemented so that Congress can get back to doing the business of the people?
I think it's pretty simple. You have to take some of the power away from the majority leader. If a bill comes out of committee on a bipartisan basis, it should get priority on the calendar. So if you have a bill in a hearing and there are some Democrats and some Republicans that vote for it, then it should move to the top of the calendar, and there should be a requirement that it be heard on the floor within so many days or so many weeks. Right now, the leader has the ability to bury anything they want, including a Supreme Court nominee, as it turned out. You need to take that power away from the leader and allow the membership to have more control over what is on the floor and when, and also filling the tree. Filling the tree is a procedure by which the leader puts amendments in all the places procedurally where amendments could go, and then no one has the ability to amend a bill. There must be a limitation on the ability of the leader to fill the tree. The tree can only be filled by amendments that are filed by individual members and voted on. And there needs to be, let's say there's going to be 8 amendments on a bill. They need to be divided by Democratic and Republican based on how the body is made up. So, or say there's 10 amendments. If there's, 55 Republicans, then there needs to be at least 6 of those amendments that are majority amendments. But then the minority would get 4 amendments. And in that way, you would begin to have more votes on actual legislation. I was actually in the Senate when we did votes on legislation. These guys didn't get to see a lot of it. Right. I was actually there early enough that I watched some real debates. I passed my first amendment on the floor of the House, which was collective bargaining for TSA agents, by a vote of 51 to 49. There were Republicans that voted for it, and there were Democrats that voted against it. And afterwards, one of the older senators came up to me and kind of put his arm around me and said, Senator, that was a very close vote. And I said, Senator, in my state, we call that a landslide.
Well, I would say that campaign finance reform would be right at the top of the list.
Yep.
Because there's one fella, and I think he did the exact same amount against you and against you. One person spent over $20 million in the Indiana Senate race, and I don't think he's ever been to Indiana in his life.
Well,
but
damn sure was never been to North Dakota.
Right. So he's got 20 million plus in. And then in my race before that, the Koch brothers had 20 million plus of their money in against me. And you look and you go, what is going on? And in their world, their tax break that they got, the money they got on taxes, the 20 million they spent in an Indiana race,
pretty good.
It's just a pocket change, And so we become cheap buys. We're not California, we're a cheap buy. They can pick up our state. And so instead of the people of Indiana deciding it, it is all these rich people and these secretive organizations have taken over American politics. And the other change I'd make, and what I've always said is, look, you give this guy 10 million, you give me 10 million. If he wants to spend it all on yard signs, is that stupid? Go ahead, that's your decision. But that's the American people then. It's our funds, and it's a very, very insignificant amount to have our government back in control of the people of this country instead of the rich people of this country. And the other thing was gerrymandering. which is a disgrace. My congressional district, I served in the House for 3 terms, and we have a Republican legislature. My district was Republican plus 7, so pretty significant Republican district. But we won, and we won, and we won, because in the House district, everybody got to know Joe. I was at every fish fry. I was at every bicycle race. I, for like 7 years in a row, shot the gun off for our marathon at 5:30 in the morning. And, you know, that's what you do. And then when gerrymandering came, when redistricting came up, they made my district R plus 14 and basically laughed and said, now we've screwed you completely. Well, shouldn't the people be deciding
But you
this?
won, Joe.
Well,
You ran for the Senate.
story.
Well, so I said, if you do this,
I'll run for
I'm running for Senate. And they all laughed and said, in Indiana, that's awesome, we're rid of you. And then I won. And
We've got one last question, and this gentleman has the mic.
Hi,
It has gone fast.
my name's Jacob. I'm a 4th year from Alexandria, Virginia. And I wanted to ask you guys, since we're talking about the state of the Democratic Party, what do you think the role of Twitter is now in kind of shaping the policy and the direction of a lot of the more progressive candidates?
Stand up so I can take your picture.
by the way,
I will
we're
tweet
really
that.
happy the Nats won the World Series, too.
I will tweet that. Well, Twitter is part of the communication now that has good things and bad things. I think it's great that if you're in elective office, you can use it to make your kind of fill out your personality to the people who you work for. So my folks in Missouri could see that I had a new grandchild I was very excited about, that I do an awesome job of cooking Thanksgiving dinner, that I was mad because my
modest.
clearly modest. That I was really mad that my children do not understand the concept of balancing a checkbook. You know, all the kinds of things that are normal stuff, right? Just normal stuff. I think that's good. The bad thing is that the people that are on Twitter that are political are very much like the people who watch MSNBC and Fox. They are, you know, there is an echo chamber there. And folks that are watching Dancing with the Stars and think we're all crazy, they're not so much into the back and forth on Twitter. And the studies have shown that on Twitter, the people that are active on Twitter for both parties are much more liberal or much more conservative than their parties. So I've seen in this presidential election where the noise in Twitter has impacted some of the candidates, and they've made mistakes that will make it harder for us to win next year because of that in Twitter. I mean, I used to get complexes. You know, I have a pretty progressive record in a really tough state. You should have seen how the left chew me up still to this day. You know, I was for Hillary Clinton instead of Bernie, and I, you know, said that if Bernie got the nomination, the Republicans would call him a socialist. Go figure, right? Yeah. And for that, I was in big trouble on Twitter with all the Bernie supporters. He's not a communist, he's not a socialist, you know, you're the problem. Well, no, I'm not the problem. I'm trying to point out what the problem could be. So it was really hard to watch me get chewed up when I have, you know, been in the trenches for women's reproductive freedom and have the NRA come after me in every election for decades, you know, and I stood strong on all those issues. And then for the base of my party, they think all 3 of us are somehow second-class citizens. That because we are okay with being a moderate, that somehow is a problem, and Twitter contributes to that. It can really gang up and be a bully. And I worry, and I've told all the presidential candidates who I've talked to, and I'm blessed that I'm good friends with many of them. Please try to stay focused on that single mom that can't get to the teacher conference because she's working a second job, and she sure as hell is not on Twitter. And she's not watching Chris Hayes or Rachel Maddow. think about those voters. And if we think about those voters, we can get rid of this guy. If we quit thinking about those voters, we're going to lose.
Our heart and soul are plumbers and nurses and teachers and farmers. And I'll never forget in 2006, when I won for the first time, my sister was with me and we went to a town about 20, 30 miles away from South Bend because everybody was out in the streets. They had helped so much. When we went there, my sister looked at me and she goes, these people have really put their heart and soul in believing that you'll make a difference for them. And they are the folks who every day, Tim Ryan's line that he used in the debate was exactly right. The Democratic Party represents the people who shower after work as opposed to the people who shower before work because they've done everything they can humanly do to raise their family and to make enough to take care of their family. They look to us, and we've gotten so sidetracked on other things that if we remember that and we stay on that, we will win next November.
Well, we can see why you all won, just listening to you and your passion. And I wanted to suggest something to you. Now, I know, Claire, you said you're happy being out. Maybe they aren't. Maybe you'll change your mind. Have you thought about moving to Virginia? Because if you haven't noticed, a Republican hadn't been elected here since 2009. So if you run as a Democrat in Virginia, you got an excellent shot of winning. It's just practical, free consultancy you won't get on Twitter.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, they did a fantastic job. We are so lucky to have them. Join me in giving them a wonderful round of applause.